rival, jealous rival. See these titles and get more than an Eiffel Towers. Knocking them with power, clocking them like an hour. My tongue is dirty, tossing in the shower. Rap, rap, fully fitted up, but I'm just in black. You gotta give it up for the West is back, and we're running it up for the left of the map. Matty to the Sac, City to the down, and put it down for the black to the browns. Hit him with a crown, coming up rough from up to downtown. Won't switch to this label when I'm brown now. Have you been around? Knocking the most of means I gotta be able to get up on that grind. Time to time, I gotta let my shine. What's mine is mine, we're still in our prime. People wanna record their stories, whether it's a hot 16 or recorders. More than most of the records that don't, the name of the joke of the money recorders. Now let me calm down for a minute and explain most crucial displays up in this. Back just to 11, Huey, what it do? This is Raid and we're trying to prove I can see ya.
Music, man, music ain't the same, man. Music change, music in my pain, man. Music, man, music ain't the same, man. Music change, music feel my pain, man. Music, man, music ain't the same, man. Music change, music in my pain, man. Music, man, music ain't the same, man. Music change, music feel my pain, man. Fuck your blue jeans, fuck your white tee, fuck your CD, boy, you ain't like me. You probably seen me, pants sag to my knees. Don't rap about what I got, but what I seen. These fake MCs think they rap, that ain't music, man. You sound the same, you should change your name to his name. I hear the same shit, I seen your main bitch. And when she get a taste, then she get on my tip. California raised, the bay is where I stay. I told you we don't play, don't wanna be my anime. I take that microphone and kill you on your own shit. I take that record deal just to get that money quick. Do my own thing, money fast, cocaine. Working overtime, grind, wind, pouring rain. Music spit hardcore, keep it contained. And when it's time to punish, then release all pain. Music, man, music ain't the same, man. Music change, music in my pain, man. Music, man.
Hey, all right. How y'all doing tonight? I'm over here trying to. I haven't had nothing to eat since breakfast, so I was trying to rush and throw something together and get something out there for dinner, but that's not gonna happen. So I just have to welcome y'all to Papa Will, the Y2K show, sitting and spitting in the kitchen. That's how I do it. That's how it works. Oh, wow. Okay. Add me to the screen. No, don't remove me. Okay, that don't work. Okay, I'm looking for me up here in this screen. Somewhere, somewhere lost in the rainbow is me. But let me get us started here. Let's just go on and jump on. I'm back now. Don't worry. That's just me pressing the wrong buttons over here. You know, unlike a lot of people, I've only been doing this for a good solid year now. I think I'm going on 2 years now. But I think a year now because I spent this whole year being out on community guideline strikes. So I really don't have a way to go here.
You're watching the Y2K show, where they play my kind of videos. Thank you for watching the Y2K show. You're watching the Y2K show, where they play my kind of videos. Where they play my kind of videos.
Soy Roberto, El Favorito Gringo, mi pelo es blanco, hecho en San Mateo. Dime cuando ven a México, soy una California oso, más grande de mis sueños. Es un nuevo año, nuevo tempo, no ratos or...
Quiet on the set. Quiet on the set.
You're watching the Y2K show, where they play my kind of videos. Thank you for watching the Y2K show.
There's a reason for the seasons change, a reason for those birds that sing, a reason there's no need to explain. Oh, as I wake up to this brand new day, I thank the Lord for granting me His grace and opportunity. Another moment, bless the chance to just improve myself. Another moment, bless the chance to just improve myself.
Self-improvement, motivation.
Absolutely.
Oh, feel the spirit's movement. Feel them talking to me as I sleep. Things I used to do before, no longer need to do anymore. I'm about a better way. There's so much more I see. Oh, there's a reason for the seasons change, a reason for those birds that sing, a reason that there's no need to explain. Oh, breakfast still around me, so grateful that you found me, so thankful for the love you share. Every moment lasts. Oh, another moment lasts. Oh, another moment lasts. Oh, another moment lasts. Oh, another moment lasts. This chance to just improve myself. Another moment lasts. The chance to just improve myself. Another moment, bless the chance to just improve myself. Another moment, bless the chance to just improve myself. Another moment, bless the chance to just improve myself. La 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 la. Oh.
Let me remind everybody that on Sunday, we're going to have a special Christmas Eve show. And I talked to Michael, and he has agreed to do a couple of his numbers for us. So y'all get ready for that. All right?
Oh my God.
All right. Are y'all ready for the next part of the show? Let me give everybody a warm up of so far what we've gotten over here, because I see that we got at least one new face in here. So let me just tell you what we've been doing. We've been traveling. Hey, the word, what's going on with you? Kalani, what's going on with you, man? Andre, what's going on with you, man? Everybody, what's up with you? Huh? My Ada kicked in, huh? Hey, but like I'm saying, we have been looking at what some people consider what race means, what white means, and we have come to the conclusion that the census that they take here in America, probably when it comes down to those of us that actually click that button saying Afro-American, we are signifying that we consider ourselves someplace from somewhere that doesn't even exist in our history. There's no such thing as the African slave trade, okay? I've been preaching this and preaching this. That's the number one thing I'm trying to get over to everybody, is that there never was anything known as the African slave trade. Native Americans were the original people here, been here since before the Egyptians knew where they were. The Hebrew language is based off of Native American symbols and letters and words from ancient time. They call this the old new world. People feel like they discovered this world and had never been allowed access to come here. And you see why, because as soon as they started allowing strangers to come here, we had the Spanish conquistador or King Charles himself come here and wipe out 11 million Native Americans. Do you realize how many more people of Swarthy complexion there would be in this country if 11 million people hadn't been destroyed, mothers raped, children put into slavery? Can you imagine? And so, like I'm saying about this census thing they do. Do you know that in the 1860 census, if you was not from the United States and you came here from any part of Europe, you were classed as being a white person, and not color white, just that class category of white, because there was no such thing as Negroes here. There was only Native Americans here. But when the Inquisition occurred, they were running out every Jew, every Moor out of Spain that would not convert over to Christianity. Talk about religion. But what it really was doing, it was taking the royals, these royals, Sephardic Jews, these royal Morisco Moors, meaning that people that had land and money and stake in life, they were running these people off so they could take all that from them. And if you didn't convert, you had to leave. And that meant leave all your belongings, your home, your chattel, your kids, not your kids, but your gold, your priceless paintings. You had to go as fast as you could and get out of town or else die. So where did those people go? Well, first they went next door to France. And I say next door to France, I mean, to the west. They migrated to France. They migrated to Germany. They went to Scotland, Ireland, Russia, China. They went everywhere they could go to get away from King Charles and his Inquisition, right? So by the time they really found out about a place that the Spaniards, I just mentioned, had overrun back in the 1490s, 1500s, they finally found out that in the 1700s that they could escape to America through Great Britain on these boats. If you had enough money to pay your way, pay your way. If you didn't, you came over as an indentured servant. And the rest of the people were just people that King James VI didn't want in his country no more. And he was just shipping them off to America to be indentured servants, which he later evolved into the word slaves. So you had all these indentured white people coming over here. You had all these Morisco Moors and Sephardic Jews claiming that they were Christians, and that term was called crypto-Christian. Now, I'm sure y'all all know what crypto means now, right? Secret, front. It's a front. Crypto means to front, to not be telling the truth, to not be being straight up. So you had all these crypto Christians come to America, and we learned yesterday that a large number of them settled in South Carolina. And I'm believing all day while I was out, I'm thinking, man, they probably settled there because there's probably a lot of ancestors of theirs that had come over as converts during the crusade. So they might be able to hook back up with some relatives that, you know, like Christopher Columbus. He was a crypto Christian. He wasn't really a Christian. He was, you know, faking Christian, but he was a Sephardic Jew. And these are all black people that I'm referring to, you know. These are all black people from all over Europe come to America, and suddenly they're in charge. They're running things. And that's what we're going to look at closer today, is how did they come over here like aliens on a spaceship, and the next thing you know, they got banks. We talk about oh, wow. I'm about to go political, y'all. We talk about how there's so many people trying to get over the fence down in Mexico and Texas, and that when they come here, the Chinese, the Indians, they get given money, you know, loans, homes, cars, good credit. And we don't get how that occurs. Well, that's the same way that the Sephardic Jews and the Morisco Moors came over here. They came over here. Next thing you know, they got banks over here. They got towns over here. And in the South, they started building cotton gins that really worked better than the original one did. They started growing crops here. And I don't want to get ahead of that story, but, you know, that's going to lead up to some stuff. Right where we're at right now, we haven't gotten to the point where the Morisco Moors and Sephardic Jews decided that Great Britain, they didn't need Great Britain no more. Get on. You know, taxation without representation, we ain't going for that. Back up. It's our land now. And they didn't even ask the Native American what he thought, because they were taking land from Native Americans and giving it to these Sephardic Jews with paperwork in banks. You know, Native Americans never were into that. They didn't get down that way. So I don't want to kill y'all with what I'm saying, because I don't want you to think that anything that I'm saying is something that is my own personal opinion. And if you ever wonder about me, I stick to these stories because in here are the people that recorded the actual facts. You get multiple areas of people declaring the same information. That's how you verify whether it's true or not. If one person says it, then that leaves speculation. If two people from separate corners of the world, is like trigonometry. It's like making a triangle. You know, you got 3 points and you bring those 3 points together, you got the truth. Okay? I'm not here to brainwash anybody. A lot of the information we go over might be more than what you know, you can absorb, you know, but hey, the truth is the truth, and it's time that more of us learn the truth. So if you feel a need to, whenever we go to a section of this reading by Kuremio, who I trust indubitably with my research, is when they feature a book or a newspaper article and a name and a date, write that down. Research it. Do your research, like he says. Do the genealogy on who wrote that book, who wrote that article in the newspaper, who did this when, so that you become comfortable. Because that's what I do. I'm gonna tell on myself. What's up, Mike Troutman? That's what I do. I'm telling on myself now. When I watch his readings and they mention words or books or time periods, I go right over to Wikipedia. I trust Google too, because my name is on Google. But Wikipedia, you know, some of what they can tell you might be a lie, but if you dig deep enough in their information, you will find the truth down in there. All right, that's enough for me. I'll see y'all at the next break.
They talking about. Yet there has scarcely been a serious attempt to set in order the facts that have been known with reference to this theme, much less to delve into the mass of documentary evidence that might be supposed to exist.
Hold up.
Right, so
I think I might be a little bit too far ahead for some of you guys. Let me back up here a bit. So that, okay, right here, let's get some genealogy going of who's who.
Right now, Let's go back to the video presentation I have prepared for you guys. Thanks for tuning in. Let me just go back a little bit. Okay. Just the Netherlands. All right. Thanks for tuning in. I appreciate your patience. I know it's a long video, but eventually you guys can play it back as many times as you want. I like to just go deep and break things down and make things clear so we get rid of conjectures and guesses and opinions. That's the whole point of this. Share the history of the Huguenot emigration to America by Charles W. Baird. I have undertaken to narrate the coming of the persecuted Protestants of France to the New World and their establishment, particularly in the seaboard provinces now comprehended within the United States. This movement and settlement took place principally at the time of the revocation of the Edict of Nantes. But before that period, important emigrations had already occurred, emigrations to Acadia, all right? So listen to this. Even before the 1600s, right, this Edict of Nantes that these French Huguenots were coming to America, right? Now we're learning that they were coming even from the 1400s, 1500s. Listen to this. It says, but before that period, important emigrations had already occurred. Emigrations to Acadia, that's in Canada. The Acadians, the French Acadians, those are all Huguenots, right? I don't get
Haiti, that's on same thing.
Yep, yep. And these people ended up in Haiti, Florida, and Louisiana. All right. So yes, these are all. Most of these people are Huguenots, and we're gonna see who these Huguenots are, so you can understand real history. All right. We're gonna go in. We're going in deep. All right. Are we, so
One
again,
thing right before you kick off, anybody who's catching feelings over this, really shouldn't be, especially if you're a Moor. This is actually helpful to help you distinguish your Moorish lineage.
yes, yeah, like which more, which more house or which more descendant, whatever you want to call it more, you know. So shout out to Kiowa. This was when we were live back like 4 years ago, I think. We were doing the Huguenot presentation. He was with me. So this part I didn't add out, but that was a good point. It's not. This ain't about like it's ain't personal. It actually might help you if you're into the whole Moorish history. So yeah, exactly. But we didn't even get there yet. But
Yeah, we didn't got to the more
what does Moors
history
have
of
to
this
do with
whole thing.
Huguenots, Kiowa? What are you talking about, man? You're confusing me, man.
Dangling that carrot a little bit.
All right. You must know something, man. All right. So again, these Huguenots, these French, I mean, they're already in America and Acadia and Canada up there. Again, the Acadians, the French Acadians that were relocated from there or even sent to there, or Nova Scotia, right, to Canada, to the French West Indies. Again, French West Indies, where Haiti, these French Huguenots, these French Europeans, French Huguenots, so-called Huguenots in Haiti, and by way of Holland to the Dutch possession of New Netherland, now New York. And still earlier, the effort had been made by Coligny, unsuccessfully indeed, to plant a colony and provide a retreat for the French Calvinists, first in Brazil and afterwards in Florida. All right, so before I see what they're doing now. So they're not calling them Huguenots, but they know it's the same people, right? Because this is a Huguenot book. They're calling them Calvinists at this time. They weren't Huguenots yet. This is 1500s. They had a colony. They tried to make a colony down in Suriname, French Guiana, and over there near Venezuela and all that, Guyana. And they were actually warring with the Indians. The local Indians didn't like them. They were warring. The Indians, you know why they were unsuccessful? Because the Indians, you know, took them out.
They weren't having that.
They weren't having that. They weren't having it with these Huguenots. All right.
AKA chameleons.
AKA chameleons assimilators. All right. Says the volumes now submitted to the public treat first of this antecedent movements and then take up the narrative of the event that led to the more considerable and more effective emigration in the latter years of the 17th century. The attempt has been made in connection with a brief account of the Huguenots before an exodus from France to trace the fortunes of many who ultimately reached this country. The recital is by no means to be regarded as exhaustive. It is presented rather as illustrative of the subject. Yet the number of families whose places of, all right, so it keeps going, says the story of the Huguenot emigration to America has remained till now unwritten. Why has it remained unwritten? Listen to what this author is saying. This has not been due to a lack of interest in the subject, nor to a failure to recognize its importance. Its importance. Many a glowing tribute has been paid to the memory of the persecuted exiles, and many a thoughtful estimate has been formed of the value of the contribution made by them to the American character and spirit. What do they mean by that? What did they contribute to the American character and spirit? No traditions have been more fondly and reverently cherished among us than those concerning the hardships and sufferings of the fugitives from France, and no names are more honored than the names of foreign casts that indicate descent from them. All right, descent from them. Who is they talking about? Yet there has scarcely been a serious attempt to set in order the facts that have been known with reference to this theme, much less to delve into the mass of documentary evidence that might be supposed to exist. All right, so this author, I wanted to throw this in this video real quick because he's letting you know, man, they're not even paying attention. They're not really, they're like, there's so much evidence, but no attention has been made to it. Now, we're going to read this book. It says Archives Internationals de Historia de Indies, all right? International Archives of the History of Ideas. It says the Huguenot Connection, the Edict of Nantes, is revocation and early French migration to South Carolina, right? Between 1675 and 1690, from 150,000 to 200,000 Huguenots fled their native France to escape Louis the 14th, 14th final attempt to extirpate Protestantism from his lands. These refugees initially settled in the nearest Protestant sanctuaries available to them, namely Geneva, Brandenburg Hesse, the Netherlands, and England. But as prospects dimmed for return to France, many sought new homes for a permanent exile. The second migration took Huguenots refugees far from their native France and Europe to places as remote as South Africa, Russia, and South Carolina. In these new and permanent homes, the Huguenot refugees and their descendants experienced significant cultural and religious changes. Some of these alterations proved to be relatively innocuous. French weavers, chamois dressers, and silversmiths became, for example, American or British farmers. Again, pay attention when I'm telling you right here. French weavers, right? All these people, silversmiths, they became what? American or British farmers. All of a sudden, they were different people in history. Why? We'll see why. But other changes proved more problematic. Huguenots who left France to preserve their religious tradition became Anglicans. Now remember, Huguenot is more of a political term, not a religious. We just got the etymology. All right, so dodge the hijack. Presbyterians, I says they became, so look at this. Huguenots who left France to preserve their religious tradition became Anglicans, Presbyterians, and even Baptists. All right, what you guys know about Presbyterians and Baptists and Anglicans? What do you guys know about that? These Huguenots, right? So why are these Huguenots becoming all these other religions or, denominations? Men and women who had fled religious persecution profited from a slavery that victimized others. Hear that? Men and women who had fled religious persecution profited from slavery that victimized others. These same Huguenots eventually had slaves. It is possible that the commemoration of the revocation of the Edict of Nantes will stimulate a scholarship that makes sense of these and other anomalies in the history of French Protestantism. Understanding the revocation and the Huguenot migration to South Carolina lives of a remarkable coherence in the past, even amidst wrenching persecution and significant social and religious change. The revocation was more than a catalyst for Huguenot flight from France. It predicted the very character of Huguenot migration into South Carolina. In turn, the Huguenot migration and fate of its participants reflected more than European exigencies or American opportunity. They bespoke processes of change and alteration that, after the revocation, overtook French Protestantism everywhere. All right, so changes, processes of change. In short, the revocation, diaspora, and assimilation were not discrete, isolated events. They were consecutive scenes in a major historical drama that historians long ago named Le Refuge. That's what they named as refuge, refugees, the Le Refuge, the famous Le Refuge, when the Huguenots, but to which they are only now given sustained attention. All right, on the surface of the revocation appears to have been a remarkably simple event. On 17 October 1685, Louis XIV revoked the Edicts of Nantes issued by Henry IV in 1598 to grant privileges to worship to Protestants. The result was an exodus from France of about 160,000 Frenchmen, women, and children. Now, there's other scholars who have said millions, 800,000, 500, different numbers. So they don't really know the numbers. This would have been a massive exodus, even in modern times, all right? A massive exodus of Huguenots. Who's these Huguenots? All right. In fact, it was the largest population movement in early modern Europe, aside from the expulsion of the Moors from Spain. Aside from the expulsion of the Moors, so they share something. It's similar, just like the expulsion of the Moors from Spain. And it was all the more remarkable in the face of crude transportation and a social milieu that limited population mobility for most people to relatively constricted regional movement. All right, it says changes already embedded in the exodus from France quickly extended into the diaspora and directly touched the Huguenot emigration to South Carolina. With the help of demography, we can now see what contemporaries may not have noticed that the Huguenots who came to South Carolina and probably Russia, South Africa, and other British colonies in North America, all right, other British colonies in North America, were not representative of the Huguenot population that fled France. This is most obviously demonstrated in immigrants' ages. Extrapolations based on the well-known 1697 list of adult applicants for South Carolina subjectship revealed that two-thirds of the refugees' children were born in South Carolina. Less than a fifth were born in France, and fewer than a twelfth were born in the European exile centers. The same pattern held true of the refugee community at New Rochelle, New York, where a 1698 census allows us to document the refugees' actual ages, and probably also at the Narragansett settlement in Rhode Island. All right, so Huguenots all over these places, right? There's also indigenous people in these places, right? Okay. They point out major differences between Huguenot immigrants in America and refugees remaining in Europe. In short, the Huguenots who came to South Carolina composed a self-selected subgroup within the larger Exodus population, something historians now call a cohort, distinguished chiefly by its relative youth. The Exodus. It says, yet the Carolina refugees also were pursuing another occupation, farming. While they used traditional trade and merchant terms to describe themselves in their 1697 naturalization petition, many of the same refugees also were obtaining land in utterly astonishing quantities. Astonishing quantities of land. Whose land? Whose land are they getting? The South Carolina land records only describe property dispensed through direct government sale or distributed as inducements to important servants and slaves. They ignore the burgeoning market of private sales. Still, the colony's land records alone reveal that by 1700, Huguenots had acquired at least 36,000 acres of land from the government, most of this necessarily given to first generation refugees. In the next decade alone, they and their descendants acquired yet another 68,000 acres from the government by 1710. Then, scarcely 30 years after their first arrival in the colony, Huguenot immigrants had acquired more than 104 acres through government sale and distribution. So you see all the land that these people are getting, right? All right, so it says this astonishing Huguenot record makes the better known New England and Pennsylvania land acquisitions patterns pale by comparison. Historians often explain settlement in both these more northerly areas by the lure of land. In fact, South Carolina easily outstrips its northern counterparts in its distribution of land to European immigrants. The English settlers who acquired land in 17th century New England or Pennsylvania before 1720 averaged less than an eighth of the 710 acres obtained by Huguenot immigrants in South Carolina. Even the largest New England and early Pennsylvania farmers usually acquired only 300 or so acres of, it says, in addition, and somewhat surprisingly, Huguenot refugees themselves seem to have pursued land holdings more aggressively than did their Puritan and Quaker contemporaries. Certainly, some refugees acquired very little land. Isaac Vary and Isaac Remeth each received only 100 acres of land in 1694 and 1696, and obtained no more land from the government in the next decade. But others acquired enormous amounts of land. Powerful entrepreneurs like John Gaylord and Philip Gendron obtained between 3,700 and 4,300 acres, respectively, and appeared to have possessed sufficient capital to make much of it productive. It was breadth rather than the all too typical inequality of landholding that made the Huguenot record so remarkable in South Carolina. Virtually every Huguenot male known to be in Carolina in the 1690s received at least some land, 5,100 acres. So all these Huguenots were getting land. By 1710, a judgment made only on government land grant records. In contrast, New England Puritans often accepted increasingly restrictive land distribution policies. Well into the early 18th century, as the historian Philip Graven has demonstrated, men in Andover, Massachusetts, in their 50s and 60s obtained land only through inheritance from fathers who proved notoriously long lived. They did not force town authorities to sell land to them or buy it elsewhere. Moreover, neither English, Welsh, Scottish, nor German immigrants in Pennsylvania ever matched the landholding record found among Huguenots in South Carolina, however appealing William Penn's promotional rhetoric.
All right, so just real quick, want to remind everybody. So again, Huguenots, right? More Sephardic Jews, people of color, Black Europeans coming in to getting all this land, right? Whose land is it? This is what I'm trying to say. It's not personal. It's just real history, and it's in all your genealogies, like mixed in with the indigenous lines. You know, so a lot of this lineage, right? A lot of this lineage. So it's not about the so-called white evil man coming and taking the land and all that. Why I'm doing this, so you can get a better perspective and understand. Because the past is the past. You know what? Whatever, whoever our ancestors were, you know, who do you represent the most, right? Who's your spirit represent the most, right? That's all I gotta say. But I just want to remind that as we're reading here, don't be imagining again. Don't go back into the hijack and be like, oh, these white people taking our land. We just went over a couple of hours of who they were.
Thus, widespread Huguenot ownership of land in South Carolina soon produced dramatic changes in the refugees' economic and cultural life. One of the less traumatic changes involved the disappearance of traditional Huguenot trades after 1700. The rich, complex occupational identifications that appeared on the 1697 naturalization petition soon gave way to a ubiquitous designation typical of all European settlers in the colony, planter. All right, so they let go of what they used to be or do, and they just became what? Plantation managers, planters. All right, they were basically getting their own plantations. By the 1720s and even as early as 1710, Huguenots, after Huguenots called, no longer used the traditional French occupational classifications to identify themselves. Little evidence suggests that they eschewed their old occupations deliberately, although evidence on these matters is extremely thin. It does suggest that Huguenots used their old skills when it was desirable. South Carolina, a history. Walter Edgar. South Carolina had one of the more heterogeneous European populations in British North America. By the time of the American Revolution, there were 9 European ethnic groups represented in measurable numbers. Of these, in addition to the English, the French, Scots, Irish, Germans, Welsh, and Jews maintained something of a cultural identity. The Dutch and Swedes did not. After the English, the French were the most significant ethnic group in the terms of colonial affairs. Colonial affairs, their hands in the colonial affairs, these French Huguenots, far out of all proportion to their numbers. South Carolina had the largest French population in terms of percentage. Of any of the 13 original colonies, it was a diverse group made of Huguenot refugees, French speaking Swiss, and Acadians. The first French settlers were Huguenots who were attracted to South Carolina by the promise of religious and political freedom and the availability of land. All right. All right. So they try to say, well, they wanted religious freedom and the political freedom, right? But also availability of land. I think that was the biggest reason. Availability of land. Whose
Yep.
land again?
Yep.
In April 1680, a group of 45 Huguenots arrived in South Carolina aboard the Richmond, the Huguenot answer to the Carolina and the Mayflower. Over the next few years, other immigrants emigrated as families or individuals. Then in 1685, Louis XIV revoked the Edict of Nantes that had guaranteed French Protestants the right to worship freely. Huguenots were persecuted and thousands sought refuge in Switzerland, Netherlands, England, and the New World. All right, we know the story now, right? In the decade following the revocation, 1,500 fled to South Carolina, many of them escaping with only their lives. In 1685, after months of suffering from abuses by French soldiers, Judith Gayton Manigault wrote that her family resolved on quitting France by night, abandoning the house with its furniture. We contrived to hide ourselves for 10 days while a search was made for us. The Gaytons, via an underground railroad of Huguenot sympathizers, escaped from France and made their way eventually to England and then to South Carolina. Some Huguenots remained in Charlestown, but most moved north and east along the eastern branch of the Copper River and on the vacant lands along the Santee River to what was then South Carolina's northern frontier. There they established themselves as planters. They became what? Planters and plantation owners. What does that mean? That means they had slaves, right? So there they established themselves as planters again, plantation owners, what would become one of the richest rice-grown areas of the colony. Until about 1720, they continued to speak and write in French and married within the Huguenot community. After that time, Huguenots intermarried with the English majority in the Low Country, joined the Church of England, and made little effort to perpetuate the remembrance of a distinct nationality. Few even anglicized their names. They may have become anglicized in many ways. Huguenots and their English neighbors continued to recognize the former's heritage. The area along the Santee where they lived was known as the French Santee. And when parishes were established in the 18th century, one was called St. Thomas and St. Denis. The name St. Denis, with its French spelling, allegedly is derived from the site of 16th century victory by Huguenot forces led by Admiral Coligny. The French heritage was also displayed in the retention of family names Bonneau, Cordes, de Saussure, de Vaux, Du Bois, or Du Bois, right? Du Bois, Du Bois, Webb Du Bois, Du Bois, Fort, Gaylord, Gendron, Gerard, Horry, Huger, Lawrence, Laguerre, Manigault, Marion, Perry, Porcher or Porch, Prelot, Ravenel, Simmons, and Timothy. Assimilation did not come easy for the Huguenots, who found themselves the objects of intense ethnic animosity. In the elections for the first Commons House of Assembly in 1692, 5 of the 6 delegates from Craven County were Huguenots. This led to an angry petition to Governor Philip Ludwell asking him to prevent the Huguenots from taking their seats. Shall the Frenchmen who cannot speak our language make our laws? You see what's going on? These Huguenots already making laws, right? They get in power. They gain in land and power. Trying to unseat the Craven delegation was not enough for some bigots. They demanded the enforcement of more extreme provisions of England's alien laws that would have denied Huguenots the right to vote, serve on juries, or even inherit property. Governor Ludwell ignored the protest. It permitted the Huguenots to take their seats. It says by 1730s, the Huguenots had to abandon their language and customs. Why would somebody abandon their language and customs and to merge with the English majority? Huh? They were no longer as alien as they once had been. The more they became assimilated, the more successful they became. Later, French immigrants settled on the frontier away from the centers of population and for a while clung to their own ways. So a lot of these French frontiermen, these woodsmen, these naturalists, these men going in the woods, these traders, they were Huguenots. All right, we're going to see one that's very famous later on. But most of those Frenchmen, French traders, fur traders, we already got the French enslavement video I did about the Indians. They were not just trading fur; they was trading Indians, right? Humans, or over to the English. Their buddies, you see, the ones they were assimilating with. And they too married their neighbors, whether or not they were French. In Charleston, no one really cared whether backwoods French or German settlers kept their alien culture and language out of sight and earshot. They were supposed to be the colony's first line of defense against the Indians.
So real quick, I'm in the Huguenot Society of the Founders of Mannequin Town in the colony of Virginia. We're going to be talking about Mannequin Town today again. So it's here the Monacan Indians and Mannequin Town. It says here in 1699, a Huguenot colony took the Indian land and established a settlement of their own. Huguenot colony, what? Took. They took it. They weren't giving it to them, they took it from Monacan Siouan Indians. Through intermarriage with their white settlers or through uniting with other tribes, the Monacan population gradually decreased. All right, what happened? Intermarriage with who? These Huguenot. We're going to see Moors, settlers. All right, so real quick, we're just going to read this book. It says the
Write this
history
book information
and
down if you
present
don't
state
believe
of Virginia
stuff
in
is
4 parts.
real.
All right, this is from,
Do your own
as you guys
research.
can see here, 1705. 1705, publication date, 1700s, this book. We're going to go to page 45 of this book where it starts talking about these French refugees. Who is the first refugees? The etymology of the word refugee will tell you that the first people called refugees were Huguenots. Who are the Huguenots? We're going to get into that real quick, just for reference. But before that, it says here, all the French refugees sent in thither by the charitable exhibition of His late Majesty King Williams are naturalized. They're talking about over here in Virginia and James River, Piedmont region. It says in the year 1699, there went over in about 300 of these, all right, 300 Huguenots, and the year following about 200 more, 200, that's 500 Huguenots, and so on, all right, and so on, till there arrived in all between 700 to 800 men, women, and children. They're talking about Huguenots who had fled from France on account of their religion. Protestants, right? Cryptos. The Catholics were after them, persecuting them. Most of them were cryptos. Who are the Huguenots? We're going to get into that real quick, just for reference. Those who went over there the first year were advised to sit on a piece of very rich land, about 20 miles above the falls of James River. On the south side of the river, which land was formerly the seat of the great and warlike nation of Indians called the Monacans, a warlike nation, the Siouans, ancient Siouans, none of which are now left in those parts. What happened to them? What do you mean they're not left? This is written in 1705, 1700s. What happened to the Monacans? But the land still retains their name and is called the Monacan Town. We're going to be reading about that today, what happened to Monacan Town. Who ended up with Monacan Town? The refugees that arrived the second went also first to the Monacan Town. But afterwards, upon some disagreement, several dispersed themselves up and down the country. And those that have arrived since have followed their example, except some few that settled likewise at the Monacan Town. All right.
So all those people
Who
are
settled
you?
in Monacan Town? What happened to them? They just disappeared.
That's good.
Really?
You know.
Come on now.
Now, this article is called The
Hold up.
Establishment of the Huguenots in Virginia. I'm just going to keep reading a little bit more of this history real quick. This is by Mary Wilson Bonahan Land, College of William and Mary, Arts and Sciences. All right. Now, it says here, before giving an account of the chief events relative to Huguenot history through the period leading up to the revocation of Edict of Nantes, it may be well to offer here some explanation concerning the origin of the term Huguenot, which was first used about 1560. Authorities have found it impossible to determine the true origin, right? So they don't really know the origin. They can't tell you, oh, Huguenot means this or that, and it's just some Christians. They don't, they're just making stuff up right there. Right, because they've been trying to find the origin of this appellation, and many theories have been advanced and explanation. In the etymological dictionary of Cledat, we find that Huguenot is a deformation, the aligned Huygenissen, confederaries, modeled Petrur, and it goes on. It says the formation of Huguenot from Huygenotten or Huygenotten seems to have first place among many explanations offered. As there was a party in Geneva at the time known by that name, it seems plausible that the French Protestants would have used the same term, as it is from these French provinces that originated the refugees who came to Virginia. And though it is not known from what localities all of them came, some few are known to have been natives of towns and provinces as follows. It says the family of Imbert came from Nimes, lower Languedoc. And whoever knows about Languedoc, southern France, this part of France, that was Moorish from way back, like way back. It was part of the Iberian kingdom and the Moorish kingdom. This place was a Moorish place from ancient times and Europe. All right. It says a history of the Huguenots written for the American Sunday School. It says of the family we said was a settler at Mannequin Town, Virginia. Mannequin Town, Virginia. All right. From Matouban in Guyenne came Antoine Tarbet. So from Guyenne. So see, there's a place in France called Guyenne, 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 Guyenne. You can say this Guyenne, Guyane, Guyane, Guinea, Guyenne. A place in France called Guinea, Guinea, Guyane, Guyenne came Antoine Tarbet, a Huguenot in 1687, also one of the settlers of the James River. He died in January 1724. Also from Guyane, Guyane, Louis Latague went to Virginia, and for over 30 years was minister of South Farmham Parish, Essex County, Virginia. He was a man of blameless life and devoted to the work of the ministry. From London and Poitou come Jacob Pierre and Matthew Amonet, chiefs de familles de London, 1634. Jacob Amonet was one of the settlers of Mannequin Town, right? It's a place actually named after the Monacan Indians. All right, so it says the birthplace of Oliver de la Muse, the founder of the settlement at Mannequin Town, was not far from Nantes in Brittany. Here was the seat of the noble house of Lamuse Pontus. David, his son Caesar, and his grandson Olivier. Soon after the revocation of the Edict of Nantes, Olivier de la Muse attempted to flee from France, but was arrested on the island of Ré. He was imprisoned in La Rochelle and Nantes, where every effort was made to persuade him to abjure, but without success. So he was finally expelled from France as a dangerous heretic. He was sent to England, from where he later came to Virginia on the Mary Ann in 1700. All right, the Mary Ann is a ship. All right. Also, a native of Nantes in Brittany was Paul Micau, who came to Virginia from England. From England, all right. So it's a French coming from England. All right, he might have been listed. Remember, they became American or British, right? They were starting to name themselves American or British. They were hiding their Huguenot history and settled on the Rappahannock in Essex County. Claude Philippe de Richebourg, the first minister of the Huguenot settlement in Virginia, came from Saint Sever in the province of Berry. Owing to disputes in his parish, he moved in 1707 with a number of his adherents to the Carolinas and was a pastor of the French church in Charleston. He died in 1719. It says the Mannequin Town from Port des Barquis came Jacques Bilbot to Mannequin Town, right? Jean Bilbot reconnaît Metalet sa femme, oh, that's French, 4,000 livres, fled from Port des Barquis in 1681 to England. Jacques Bilbot or Bilboa, right? You see that? Balboa, Bilboa, Billabut. You see what I was saying earlier about the surnames, right? So Billabut, Bilboa, or Balboa in Spain, Balboa, Bilbot or Bilebo, all the same. These are Huguenots, right? AKA Huguenots. One of the inhabitants of Mannequin Town, 1700, 1723, was doubtless of the same family. At South BC was born Jean Pennetier, Jacques Pennetier, fugitive de Soubise. John Pennetier, naturalized in England, March 1682. Pennetier, one of the settlers of Mannequin Town, Virginia, 1700. Chatelis in Saintonge was the birthplace of Jacques Fontaine, the Huguenot pastor, ancestor of the American families of Fontaine and Maury. All right, Maury, the Maury families, Huguenots. All right, plans and propaganda for the emigration of Huguenot to America. As has been said, the Huguenots fled from France in increasing numbers after the revocation of the Edict of Nantes, principally to the Switzerland, Holland, and England. All right, they were in all these countries, many of them by reason of the privileges extended to them in these countries. Why did they have privileges in these countries? Think about that and remember that. Others, however, a more adventurous spirit or desirous of obtaining even more freedom, left these countries for America. But even after the Great Exodus in 1685, there had been a steady stream of partisans from France, beginning with the earliest days of their persecution. Several colonies were set up in America. Some ended in failure, while others were more successful. It was but natural that many should be attracted to the English colonies of America, where they knew they would find many of their own religion or political ideas, right? And of which they had heard such inviting accounts of profitable trade and of lands of rich and agricultural promise, all right? A promised land. to encourage this inclination of the Huguenots towards America, as well as that of others who were looking with longing eyes towards this promised land, like I just said, towards this promised land. So the Huguenots coming here for what? Because they know it was a promised land, right? A few travelers of the period wrote in glowing terms of what they had seen and gave much publicity to their works, which became intentionally or not propaganda for attracting new colonists to America. Propaganda to get colonists to come to America. William Fitzhugh, as has been said, has tried to interest Hayward in sending French refugees to his lands, which later came to be known as Ravensworth, but he met with no success in that quarter. So he offered the lands himself in 1686, saying that for the French Protestants, I have convenient and good land enough to seat 150 or 200 families upon one divided, which contains 21,996 acres. All right, you hear how much acres this guy has? Is this like real? One
You
guy
like
has
we're a
all these acres.
minority in our
Whose
own
acres did
country
he
now?
take? Whose land did he take to gain all
The
this?
Huguenots
He
took
took it,
all the land and
you
killed
know,
off all
gave
the
the right,
Indians.
which I will either sell them in feed of £7 for every 100 acres, or else lease it to them for 3 lives, paying 20 shillings per annum for every 100 acres. The land I offer lies within a mile and a half of the Potomac River and of the 2 boat navigable creeks. All right, you see, he's a Huguenot. He got all this land. From the vestry book of King William's Parish, Virginia, 1707-1750, we learned that as early as 1683, Baron de Sauncey seated a colony on the Lower James, having obtained permission from the English government to establish a colony of Huguenots in Virginia. The settlement was made in what is now Nansemond County, then known as Sutton Hundred. This was evidently not very favorable location for a colony, and no records of it have been discovered. From the same source, we learned that in the year 1687, 600 Huguenots came to Virginia, and that it is very probable that some of those settled on the lands offered by William Fitzhugh, some in Stafford and some in Spotsylvania. So we see that all through the 17th century, Virginia was constantly receiving the refugees from France in large numbers and small, the number reaching its peak in 1700, when about 800 came over, many of whom settled at Mannequin Town. It is these settlers who will now be our chief concern, it says here. And it says chapter 4, the settlement of Huguenots in Mannequin Town. And it says, up James River is a colony of French refugees who at Mannequin Town live happily under our government, enjoying their own language and customs. Their own language and customs. We're going to see what that is towards the end of the video, what it really was. I know you're thinking French and Protestant right now. The settlement of Huguenots in Mannequin Town says plans for emigration had long been in the minds of those Huguenots who sailed from England in the year 1700. Plans which had been in the making for about 2 years and which had been changed many times. Much had been done in London to encourage and aid in going into America, all right? They were encouraging this to go to America, those who had become interested in so doing, since many of the refugees had come to England with few or none of their possessions and constantly required financial aid until they could establish themselves profitably. They required what? Financial aid. What does that mean?
Slavery.
It means indentured servitude. That's the only financial aid they're going to get.
It's the only financial aid you're going to get.
Or a land grant, depending on their status and their connections and their money. Disbursements were made to those needing money from the Protestant Relief Fund, a Protestant Relief Fund, to get people to come to America. Listen to this. And it was from this fund that many were enabled to come to Virginia. They had a fund for these Protestants to come to Virginia. Records in the Library of Goodhall in London give an account of these disbursements. As for example, in June 1700, the sum of 38 pounds was given to Benjamin de Jeux, minister appointed to go to Virginia. Later in August of the same year, a request for 20 pounds was made for M. Castaigne, one of the physicians among the refugees bound for Virginia. Later, still in the same year, requests were made for money for such Vaudois and French refugees as designed to settle in Virginia. Much was done also in regard to actually finding them land in America where they could settle. Negotiations had first been made with Daniel Cox, proprietary of Carolina and Florida, for purchasing land in Florida. The second objective had been Carolina. Letters in regard to the third plan indicate that land of the Nasamon River in Norfolk County had been designated as their destination. When the plans were finally carried out and 4 ships sailed to Virginia carrying them seven and 800 Huguenots, Mannequin Town on the James River was to be the final destination for many of them. All right. Although those who came over in the first ship expected to settle in Norfolk County, Mannequin Town, the place chosen for the Huguenot settlement, was the site of a deserted village of the Monacan Indians, 20 miles above Richmond. So really, so they went into a deserted Monacan town and took over the whole town, right? Why did the Monacan desert their town though? In the first place, school books would probably tell us that the mannequins caught some disease and they disappeared and were extinct and blah blah blah, right?
Oh, killed off.
But in reality, they either got enslaved as indentured servants for these Huguenots, relocated to other lands and other state reservations, or they again assimilated into their families, married into the indigenous people. And I'm saying this for a reason. All right, we're going to see that later on. So it says a slight digression will be made here in order to give some data concerning the Monacan Indians, who had villaged on the site which later was used for the settlement of the Huguenot refugees. The Monacans, the word is possibly an Algonquin one signifying a digging stick or spade, were a tribal confederacy of Virginia in the 17th century, who lived on the land of the upper waters of the James River above the falls at Richmond. They were allies of the Manahoac and enemies of the Powhatans, and their language differed from that of both of these tribes. They were finally incorporated with other remnants under the names of Saponi and Tutelo. All right? The settlements of the Monacans proper was known to the whites as Monacan Town. In 1669, they still had about 30 bowmen and 100 souls. All right?
Big up to the Saponi out there.
Yep. Shout out to Saponi Tutelo nations. And so they're letting us know that in 1669, there were still Monacan people there. So what do you mean there was a deserted town? They just contradicted themselves.
Yep.
Francis Louis Michael, in the report of his journey from Bern, Switzerland to Virginia, October 2, 1701, makes some interesting statements regarding these Indians. He says that the soil at Mannequin Town is black and heavy. Black and heavy. Black. The soil is what? Black. Black soil. When I say black soil, black land to you, black soil, what comes to your mind right now? The etymology of Kemet, if you don't know Kemet, if you look at it right now, if you go look at it, Kemet, the real etymology is basically black soil, a fertile black land, fertile soil, black soil. Again, he says that the soil at Mannequin Town is black and heavy, and so the Indians had reason to choose this place. All right, it was fertile. That was their place. That's why they were there. Today there is a red rough stone. Now there's a red rough stone. What did these Huguenots do? Now it looks like Egypt, modern Egypt, they're saying, red rough stone, standing 4 feet high out of the ground, where at certain times the Indians held religious services, as they supposed about 30 years ago. They still dwelled there. But when they inflicted some injury upon the Christians, Claude Bourne, who was then living on the frontier, namely at Fallen Creek, mounted one of his company and attacked the Indians boldly. He soon overcame them and put all of them to the sword. Also destroyed their settlement and whatever they owned. So you see what happened to them, right? Indentured servants, most likely. As has been stated, 4 ships, Virginia, bringing the refugees. The first of these 4 ships, the Marianne, and brought to Virginia July 1700, 207 men, women, and children. Many of these went to Mannequin Town. The pastor Claude Philip de Richburg was among these, as well as the Marquise de la Muse and de Sally. On the second ship, the Peter and Anthony, which arrived in Virginia about September 20, 1700, there were 169 refugees. On board this ship was Benjamin de Jukes, who was the pastor. So de Jukes, Benjamin de Jukes, right? Gosh, the high tag, who was their pastor, right? And was also the real founder and leader of the whole settlement of Mannequin Town. Oh, the founder and settler, this de Jukes. In order to ensure that Huguenots would live happily in Virginia and to encourage colonization by them, they were accorded special privileges. 10,000 acres of land were donated to them. Okay? 10,000 acres of land donated to them. The best of the James River, the best on the James River, 20 miles above Richmond, being the deserted village of the Monacan Indians, a fertile, very fertile place, huh? What a coincidence. They were soon granted full citizenship. Oh, they got their citizenship. They got their nationality. Good for them, huh? Citizenship, nationality. Oh, they got a nationhood now. And were exempted from taxation for a period of 7 years. Oh, hold up. So why are they exempted from taxation and they're getting full citizenship? Why are they getting all these privileges? Man, these Huguenots. They were granted freedom of worship under ministers of their choice.
So I just wanted you guys to see what happened. I just wanted to show you this historic marker here. As it says here, Huguenot settlement. In 1700,
Check this
1701,
out, y'all.
Huguenots, French Protestant refugees, all right, who's the Protestants now you know, aka Moors, settled in this region on land provided to them by the Virginia colony. The Huguenot settlement, known as Monacan Town, centered at the former site of a Monacan Indian town. Former site. What happened? All right. Located south of the James River, during this period, the Monacans and other Indian tribes traded with the settlers. In 1700, the Virginia General Assembly established the King William Parish, which enabled the Huguenots to have their own church, pastor, and set their own parish titles. Over time, the Huguenots obtained individual land grants on both sides of the James River and throughout this region. And from there, the Monacan history or people disappear, right? Or supposedly go extinct, right? They don't know what happened to them. They started being labeled so-called Negroes, indentured servants, Cherokee, or the Huguenots started assimilating or amalgamating with them. And that was the case many times. I think this is very important, like, you know, again, a tribe that people really don't know, and they are suing. Just wanted to bring this to your attention. Let's remember the Monacan nation, who had been living in this region for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. They know people was living in this area up to 18,000 years. They have found evidence of human habitation that long in this area. Again, these are part of the mound building culture that was over here in the eastern shore. The Siouans that came down from Ohio. And these people were there for so long. And then here comes the Huguenots. Now they even take over their own town and call it Monacan Town. And then they're saying, well, we don't know what happened to them. They disappeared. We just inherited their town. Luckily, this rich land. And this wasn't the so-called white man that came, took the land. Just want you guys to see. This was all planned. Virginia colony. They were given land grants. They were helped. These were refugees fleeing the Catholic and taking Indian land.
All right, so now we're going to read about a specific history of a specific family that you didn't even know about. It's a historic person in the history of America and the Revolution. And I'm in the Suffolk County, Massachusetts genealogy and history. All right, biographies of the Revere family of Massachusetts. Genealogical and personal memoirs relating to the families of the state of Massachusetts, Cutler and Adams, 1910.
The British are coming. The British are coming.
It says Jean Revere, the immigrant ancestor of the Revere family of Massachusetts, belonged to the ancient and distinguished family of Rivoiries, or des Rivoiries, or Romagnew of France. They were what? Huguenots. They were Huguenots. And some of the family fled from France during the Catholic Inquisition. He married Magdalene Malapurgi. Children, Simon Elson's son was a refugee from France, went first to Holland and afterwards settled in the Isle of Guernsey, Great Britain. Took with him the coat of arms of the family on a silver seal, and these arms were afterwards registered in the French heraldry book in London at the herald's office of Apollos Isaac mentioned below. So it says Isaac Rivori, son of Jean Rivori, was born about 1670 in France, married 1694, Serene Lambert. They had several children, one of whom was named Apollos. The following account of his birth was written in the family Bible by the father, and a copy of it sent to the Colonel Paul Revere, Boston, by Matthias Rivori, a second cousin of Martel near St. Foy, France. Apollos Rivori, or son, was born the 30th of November, 1702, about 10 o'clock at night, and was baptized at Recon, France, at Palos Ribori. My brother was his godfather, and Anne Malman, his sister-in-law, his godmother. He set out for Guernsey on the 21st, 1715 of November. According to the late General Joseph Warren Revere, Apollo's the father of the famous Paul Revere. Paul Revere. What do you guys know about Paul Revere?
Mm-hmm.
Well, he's a Huguenot, and his name is not Revere. It was Rivoire. Rivoire. So when we look at Paul Revere's images of today, we got to dodge the hijack. Became the true heir and lineal representative of his brother Simon de Rivoire and the American branch of the family. Consequently, is the legal heir at the present day. All the other heirs having become extinct. The American family would inherit the titles and estates, if any now remain to inherit. Paul Revere, an American Huguenot, right? So dodge the hijack with this image.
That's pretty good, but
The 18th of April 1775 is a date familiar to Americans, thanks to Henry Wadsworth Longfellow's stirring poem, The Midnight Ride of Paul Revere. This vivid recounting of the courageous night ride that gave alert that British regulars were marching on Lexington and Concord has thrilled readers for generations. The ensuing skirmishes, which forced a retreat of the British, are considered the first battles of the American Revolution. Who was this Boston silversmith? A silversmith. Remember the Huguenots? That was one of their trades. The American patriot with the French-sounding last name.
yeah, I'm cool
Paul
for right
Revere
now.
was the son of Apollos Rivoire, who was born in
This is my
1702
second
in
roll.
Ricard in the Gironde Valley near Bordeaux. The family was French Huguenot, and because of the persecutions following the revocation of the Edict of Nantes, many thousands of Huguenots were forced to flee to Protestant tolerant countries. The child Apollos was first sent to safety to an uncle on the island of Guernsey, but then the uncle paid for his nephew's sea passage to Boston and New World. He probably had to be an apprentice to his uncle and pay that back. Puritan New England was a welcome destination for the Huguenots. All right, escaping why? Why is Puritan New England a again just like Virginia, Mannequin Town, all that, and South Carolina, right? All this promise of land to them, the promised land. Puritans, what do the Puritans have to do with Huguenots? We'll see. Escaping persecution in 1735, most of Boston's 14 established churches were Calvinist. One was French Reformed. Apollos turned 13 on the sea voyage and was apprenticed again, and was what? Apprenticed to a master goldsmith, where he became a skilled artisan. Skills and training he eventually passed on to his son. Now, are they talking code here when they talk about apprentice to a master? And they passed the skills and training to his son, Paul Revere. This apprentice skills of a master. What are we talking here? You know what I'm talking about. Now we're in this article. It says the effects of the Huguenot diaspora on the American Revolution. Remember Paul Revere, right? The Redcoats are coming. He was a Huguenot, right? So it says this is a thesis presented to the faculty of the U.S. Army Command and General Staff College in partial fulfillment of the requirements for the degree. Master of Military Art and Science, Military History by Stephen D. Griffin, Major, U.S. Army. BA in University of Alabama, Tuscaloosa, Alabama, 1993. It says here, Louis XIV's 1605 revocation of the Edict of Nantes led to a diaspora of an estimated 200,000 French Protestants, Huguenot refugees throughout Europe and North America, in what is known as Les Refuges. These Huguenots often intermingled and intermarried with earlier French Protestant Walloon refugees from the Spanish Netherlands, all right? The Walloons are just basically Calvinists, so-called Calvinists that had already been in Holland. They were just called Walloons, but they're the same people, same Huguenots, same Protestant people, so-called Protestant people. And they were calling it what? The Spanish Netherlands, because Spain, what? Had control? The Spanish Netherlands, Holland? What does Spain have to do with Holland? And the Habsburgs and Charles V, huh? It's all connected. By the time of the American Revolution, many of these refugee families had achieved significant political and economic power in their host nations. So these refugees and this diaspora, right? These poor refugees, hey, they didn't do so bad. Everywhere they went, they were getting land, economic power, right? Political and economic power. Often leveraging refugee networks that crossed the Atlantic and span generations as part of a larger Protestant international. Because these are what? All the same people. These networks that cross the Atlantic and span generations. They span what? Generations. It says the result was that a large percentage of key American, British, French, and various German-speaking participants in the American Revolution had at least partial Huguenot ancestry. Given this high level of participation, this study focuses on what actual demonstrated effects of the existing Huguenot network had on the conflict, as seen against instruments of power in the dime model of diplomacy, information, military, and economics, and to see if they were leveraged to any marked advantage. It also reviews to what extent these connections varied across different ethnic groups that the refugees accumulated into, if there are any resultant effects on non-Huguenots, and if these transatlantic connections distinguish the Huguenots from other immigrant groups in the American Revolution. Now, he's saying here that this patriot force would include over 200 militia led by Lieutenant Colonel John Sevier, that's a French last name, right? Including his brother, Captain Robert Sevier. The Sevier brothers were descendants of French Protestant refugees Huguenots, who originally spelled their family name Xavier or Javier. See, that's from Spain. Javier, Xavier, there you go. And had immigrated to the Shenandoah Valley and Baltimore, Maryland. Over a couple of generations, the family assimilated into the Scots. They became Scots, all right? They assimilated again. So they became assimilated into the Scot
We might be
Irish.
using the
They were
actual
moving
standard
southwest along the Appalachian frontier and established a reputation among the community as both local political and military leaders, right? Now, what else was going on in the Appalachian Mountains? What known indigenous group, right? What they say are mixed people were Europeans. Yeah, so we're talking about the Melungeons. Huguenots were there too in the Appalachians, and they were mixing with local Indians. So a lot of those Melungeons have Huguenot ancestry. All right. The remaining over mountain men also include at least one other Huguenot descendant, frontiersman John Crockett. All right, Johnny Crockett. John's family name had originally been the Crocketug. So these Crocketts anglicized their name as well. When they escaped from France to Ireland, the Crocketts came to identify themselves with their Presbyterian neighbors. But listen to this. So these are Huguenots who became Presbyterians, participating in the mass migrations from Ulster to colonial Americas. So a lot of the Black Irish included Huguenots. John's son, David, would arguably become the most famous American frontiersman, even before events at the Alamo elevated him to the status of Texas legend. Beyond this important strategic victory is the strategic implication, this of a handful of Huguenot descendants participating on opposing sides at a key battle of the war, perhaps representing a sort of microcosm of effects played across the American Revolution. What effects, if any, did the Huguenot diaspora have on the American War of Independence between 2,000 or 4,000 French Protestant refugees out of an estimated total 200,000 Huguenot refugees? Ultimately immigrated to the British colonies in North America prior to the American Revolution. This resulted in an estimated 20,000 Huguenot descendants living in colonial America by the period of the Revolutionary War. Yet any quick review of the list of founding fathers, patriot leaders, and Revolutionary War historical figures results in names like Elias Boudinot, John J. Henry Lawrence, Francis Marion, and Paul Revere, to say nothing of the hidden Huguenot. Again, they're saying right here, they say to say nothing of the hidden Huguenot heritages of men like George Washington, Alexander Hamilton. So it says a deeper review used a far greater number of Huguenot descended participants with names like Molyneux, Izard, and Freneau. This quantifiable evidence expands even further when combined with predominantly loyalist families like the Delanceys and the aforementioned De Peystiers. These loyalists often served alongside British Huguenots named André de Montresor, or even with the numerous Swiss Huguenots, the Swiss Huguenots in British service that included names like Haldimand and the distinguished Prevost family. All right, so I hope you guys are seeing how these Huguenots were everywhere in Europe before they come to America. So when they came to America, now you got French Huguenots, British Huguenots, Irish Huguenots, Swiss Huguenots. You see what I'm saying? That the baseline assertion given this handful of examples drawn from much larger pool is that the amount of Huguenot participation in the American Revolution far exceeded the expected from the size of the initial refugee population. But this assertion, however
revolution. We thought this
significant
was
and
all a bunch of white
quantifiable
people.
it
Yeah.
is merely a measure of performance. A more important question, given of disproportionately high level of participants on all sides of the American War of Independence, who had some degree of French Protestant refugee ancestry, is what sorts of effects did those Huguenot connections have? The Huguenots were no Protestant Illuminati plotting over generations to play both sides of the Atlantic chessboard, and if they were a
I went
strangely
back the wrong way.
misogynist version.
It wasn't here.
However, the Huguenot diaspora did result in a Huguenot international as a core part of the larger Protestant international of the 17th and 18th centuries. The refugees possessed cultural and linguistic connections across the Atlantic. Family immersion networks established remarkably quickly and maintained over generations overlapping connections that cut across various instruments of power. By the time the American War of Independence, these descendants were often only 2 or 3 generations removed from France, at times even less, with many descendants in concentrated settlements still demonstrating an ability to speak French. The Huguenots were a group with a shared religious heritage, and also a heritage of persecution by royal authority that had resulted in numerous wars and rebellions back in France. Yet some still supported the revolution of the potential cost of their lives and fortunes, while others were just as willing to risk the same for the British crown. A cultural factor affecting these decisions may rest not at the stream's destination but back in the French watershed. Another about Francophile, one with Huguenot connections despite his lack of proven French ancestry, was Thomas Jefferson. Originally from Wales, the Jeffersons family settled in colonial Virginia, full of French Protestant families, scattered from Mannequin Town to Williamsburg. All right, we got that earlier, Mannequin
So
Town.
what he
His
told me
neighbors
when he
included
got
the
down to Thomas
descendants of both the
Jefferson
Huguenot
is that
Martin and S.E.
everybody's name,
families.
practically or
Young Thomas
almost,
was tutored
or
in
mostly
French by
everybody
Scottish
that's
rector
on the
William Rector,
Constitution of the
whose
United
parish
States
register was filled
was
with
a
French names,
Swarthy
and he later went
Huguenot.
to school taught by Irish Huguenot James Morey. Along with numerous Huguenot descendants, Jefferson was a close friend of English Huguenot Francis Fauquier, Lieutenant Governor of Virginia. So it says Jefferson later employed the services of one Huguenot, poet Philip Freneau, to criticize the policies of another Huguenot, his chief rival Alexander Hamilton. But it is purely suppositional to assert what affects this interaction with all these descendants. It says here John Adams was aware of John Jay's Huguenot refugee ethnicity when he deplored the New Yorker's strong prejudices against the French prejudices congruent with Jay's accompanying anti-Catholic asserting during the negotiations for the Treaty of Paris that he, Jay, didn't like any Frenchman. In 1806, the exiled Dutch, so this Jay, who was a Frenchman, was pretending not to like Frenchmen.
Mhm.
In 1806, the exiled Dutch radical Francois Adrien van der Kemp would feel comfortable enough with Adams' knowledge of the Huguenots to discuss the very origin of the word Huguenot with him. Remember the origin? He wanted him to know, hey, it means this, man, conspirators, confederacy. You want in? Years later, in his 1821 letter to Alden Bradford, Adam is confident enough to identify the Huguenot ancestry of Massachusetts Governor James Bowdoin and the marriage of Samuel Dexter to another Huguenot reflecting. All right, so if you from Boston, if you grew up in the hood in Boston, especially Dorchester, Roxbury, you know Dorchester got Bowdoin Street. Bowdoin Street, I was there a lot. My friends are from Bowdoin Street and Geneva Avenue. And yeah, Bowdoin Street is a Huguenot street. Down in South Carolina, Patriot John Rutledge was he surrounded by Huguenots in Carolina Low Country. Given this background, it should be no surprise that a young Rutledge would remember Henry Lawrence in their first meeting as a swarthy, as a what? As a swarthy, what? Well-knit man, below medium height, clearly a Huguenot. Why is he clearly a Huguenot? Because he's so swarthy, hashtag so swarthy. The hidden Huguenots. The identification of Huguenots and their probable effects on the colonial and revolutionary periods of American history first begs a question. What exactly constitutes a Huguenot name? The general answer to this refers back to both the premier, petite, and second grand refuge, and also invokes making distinctions between French-speaking Walloons that fled the attentions of the Duke of Alva in the Spanish Netherlands, and later French-speaking Huguenots who fled France, particularly from the later Aristocratic Catholic refugees fled the French Revolution to Philadelphia and New York, giving expatriates like Talleyrand and Noyes the chance to cement friendship with Alexander Hamilton and remark upon how he spoke French like a native. All right, so Alexander Hamilton, it says here, spoke French like a native. Why did he speak French like he was a native French? Because his mom was a French, she was a Huguenot. And the number of French Catholic refugees who fled to Charleston, South Carolina from Saint Domingue, modern Haiti, again, and the number of French Catholic refugees who fled to Charleston, South Carolina from Saint Domingue, modern Haiti. Why did they flee? Why were they fleeing from Haiti now? Were they being persecuted there? Were they driven out by the indigenous Inca army that Dessalines had, and actually greater than the French partisans that preceded them? Finally, some family names like Martin transcend multiple nationalities. Martin, that's a Huguenot name, and it can extend from documented Huguenots like Virginia settler Jean Martin to non-Huguenots like North Carolina Governor Joshua Martin. It says here, Huguenot names are often hidden by combination of three factors. Why are they hiding their names? Masking adjustment and conversion. Huguenots displayed a remarkable ability to integrate and often prosper in the communities within which they sought refuge. Exogamy, in this case, exemplified by intermarriage with non-Huguenots, means that many French Protestant lineages are maxim on maternal lines that often narrow to a single paternal family name. Washington hides Marty Au, and Hamilton is better known as the bastard son of a Scotch peddler than for learning French at the knee of his mother, Rachel Fawcett. She was the Huguenot. Finding an accompanying birth name like that of Governor Morris is a rare clue, and even this helpful road sign does not prevent the U.S. Army Center for Military History from describing him simply as descended from Welsh soldiers. Cultural biases and narrative agendas. Yet often the existence of Huguenot lineage or relationship is not highlighted, not because it is unknown, but because it does not serve the existing narrative or agenda of the author. That's a big one right there. They're leaving this part out. Why are they leaving the Huguenot part out? This bias is understandable if the focus is, for example, on the Scots, Irish, or German migrations to colonial America. But the omission often seems flagrant. James Webb, Born Fighting, does make a handful of mentions of the Huguenots among the other ethnic groups that the Scots Irish accepted into their ranks. However, the individual's French Protestant ancestry may prove interesting, but not relevant. It's not relevant now. Don't worry about it. It's in the past. Not far from the Victory Monument in Yorktown, Virginia, memorializing the British capitulation in 1781, there stands another smaller monument marking the homestead of Huguenot Nicholas Martel. He is the earliest American ancestor of what? Of George Washington, a Huguenot, all right? Along with other patriots like Virginia Governor Thomas Nelson Henry, Light Horse Harry, Lee, and many other members of the first families of Virginia. Again, many other members of the first families of Virginia. It says Washington also knew and conducted business and corresponded with numerous Huguenot descendants, from the eccentric Peter La Billiere to the, that sounds like almost like billionaire. That's where the word billionaire comes from. La Billionaire. All right? To the thoroughly well connected Alice Delancey Izzard, as commander in chief of the Continental Army. His personal staff included Huguenots, Alexander Hamilton and John Lawrence, who, along with the Marquis de Lafayette, made up the French corner of his mess tent. Part it says George Washington was the great grandson of a Huguenot named Nicolas Martel. Martel was born near the Huguenot stronghold of La Chorelle in France. He left France to come to England, and he was mentioned in the register of the famous Huguenot Church of Threadneedle Street, London, 1615. In 1619, Nicholas was naturalized English. All right, so became an English. You hear that? A year later, he left England on a ship called the Francis Bonaventure and arrived in Virginia. He built a fence around Jamestown Fort, and this helped the settlers to survive a Native American uprising in 1622. Well, thanks, Nicholas the Huguenot. When George Washington married, his wife wore a dress of yellow brocade, silver bodice, and silver petticoat. The dress was made in Spitalfields by the Huguenot silk weavers. There have been 43 U.S. presidents, and 20 of them have Huguenot ancestors.
See that? Or
Davy Crockett,
have
right,
been black.
was an American folk hero, soldier, frontiersman, and politician. Davy was the fifth of the 9 children born into the rough world of the American frontier. Many European immigrants changed or altered their surnames. All right, why did they alter their surnames? And this is also true for the Crockett family. The name was originally Crocketagne, and the family were descendants of Huguenots that fled to England, Ireland, and America. 1812, Crockett volunteered as part of a group of militia against the Creek Indians. His duties included reconnaissance and fighting both the Creek Nation and the Redcoats, the British. Following the war with the Creek Nation, Crockett became one of the principal commissioners of peace in Lawrence County, Tennessee, and was chosen by his contemporaries to be the lieutenant colonel of the 57th Regiment of Militia. Now it says here the Huguenots in America. Huguenot settlers immigrated to American colonies directly from France and indirectly from the Protestant countries of Europe, including the Netherlands, England, Germany, and Switzerland. Again, as you see a recurring theme here, a lot of these so-called Germans and French and Dutch people, we always thought they were just separate people, but a lot of them were just Huguenots. They were the same people. All right. Although the Huguenots settled along almost the entire eastern coast of North America, they showed a preference for what are now the states of Massachusetts, New York, Pennsylvania, Virginia, and South Carolina. Just as France suffered a notable loss, though the immigration of those intelligent, capable people, so the American colonies gained, the colonists became farmers, laborers, ministers, soldiers, sailors, people who engaged in government. The Huguenots supplied the colonies with excellent physicians and expert artisans and craftsmen. For example, Irene Dupont brought his expertise for making gunpowder, learned from the eminent Lavoisier and Apollo Rivori. Remember Apollo Rivori? He was a goldsmith. Oh, he was helping him make the bullets. You see? Paul Revere's dad, another Huguenot. All right, it says Paul Revere, master, silversmith, and renowned patriot. George Washington himself was the grandson of a Huguenot on his mother's side. The Huguenots adapted themselves readily to the New World. Of course, they've been adapting everywhere they went. Their descendants increased rapidly and spread quickly. Today, people of Huguenot origin are found in all parts of our country. In our country, all parts of our country. Who were these Huguenots?
The Huguenots says here the first settlers in the province of New York. Again, New Amsterdam, the Quarterly Journal of New York State Historical Society. Says it has been generally supported that the Dutch were the only settlers in New York entitled to very much consideration at the hands of the historians, but the Huguenots were first in the field and formed a very important element both in numbers and influence. The history of the Huguenots in the province of New York began in 1622 when certain Walloons petitioned the King of England for permission to settle in Virginia. The petition was not granted. About 2 months later, certain Walloons, probably the same person, petitioned the State General Holland for permission to settle in New Netherland, and the request was granted. In the spring of 1622, the West India Company equipped a vessel called the New Netherlands, of which Cornelius Jacobs was skipper with 30 families, mostly Walloons. They sailed by way of the Canaries and reached New Amsterdam, where they became the first permanent settlers. The first white child born in province was of Huguenot parentage, all right? So dodge the hijack with because they're saying Huguenots are white. We know better than that. All right, so again, we're going to get into it. These people eventually settled in New Paltz, New York. At New Paltz, the church organized has always remained, and records have been transferred and printed in book form. The Dutch language did not supersede the French until about 3/4 of the century. After the settlement, the church about the time began affiliated with the Dutch. So these French Huguenots were basically set in New Paltz, New York. We're going to get somebody's ancestor that comes out of there, and that would be the Dubois family, the Dubois family. They settled, those are some of those Huguenots that settled in New Paltz, New York, New Rochelle.
All right, so we're in the University of Central Florida. The Evolution of French Identity, a study of the Huguenots in colonial South Carolina, 1680 to 1740. Nancy Moore, University of Central Florida. And it says here, the Carolina Huguenots left France and settled in England because of the religious tolerance offered by the Church of England. Then they resettled in Carolina because of the economic opportunities advertised through numerous pamphlets. Again, they were passing out pamphlets like, hey, you want to go to the promised land and get all this land? All you got to do is move the Indians out the way and just have them work for you for 7 to 8 years, and you can be very successful. They were passing around these pamphlets, several of which were printed in French. The dream of many Calvinists who immigrated to Carolina was to make a life for themselves and their posterity in a land that offered both economic prosperity and religious tolerance. In their pursuit of prosperity and toleration, these French immigrants encountered and overcame multiple political, religious, and economic challenges. Their participation in these struggles reveals the changes in their identity as an immigrant group as they adapted from Huguenot immigrants to merchants and planters to white British colonists. Several other colonial historians have examined the French in Carolina. Author H. Hirsch's book, The Huguenots of Colonial South Carolina, is seminal in the study of Huguenots in Carolina. Writing in 1928, Hirsch interpreted the historical data at his disposal and concluded that while the Carolina Huguenots were unsuccessful in their religious ventures, they were quite successful economically. Hey, they didn't do so good with their religious part, but yo, hey, man, they made a lot of money. Now it says he praised the Huguenots for their rapid absorption into British society by stating that they were practically forced into allegiance with Anglicanism in rapidity and completeness while overcoming their British neighbors economically. Hirsch's work was useful as resource, and while he reached the same conclusions concerning absorption into British society as Godfriend, he examined Huguenot behavior from a British point of view. John Butler, a social historian whose book The Huguenots in America, a Refugee People in New World Society, was written in 1983. This book served as a valuable tool in the further examination of the overall behavior of French refugees in colonial America because Butler looks at Huguenots in New York City, Boston, and Charleston. His argument, however, is quite similar to Goodfriend's and Hirsch. In this analytical work, Butler states that while the French were fairly prosperous politically and economically, they did not sustain their Huguenot religion. Again, they didn't care about sustaining their whole identity. Why? A strong identifying factor for the French. In this conclusion, amply entitled Everywhere They Fled, Everywhere, Bertrand van Rumpmek, in his most recent published work, From New Babylon to Eden, where's the Eden? America, right? The Huguenots and their migration to colonial South Carolina. That's where their Eden was. Says here, presents the most complete look at the Carolina Huguenots today. He examines the issues around the unraveling of Huguenot identity and concludes that the Huguenots attempted to acquire the economic and legal means to put down roots and prosper after arriving in Carolina. Their goal was not so much to preserve their Huguenot identity. Their goal is not to really preserve or tell people or let people know that they were Huguenots. As to live fully and to participate in the formation of a new world society, new world society. However, Van Ruybenke works is limited to the first generation only and fails to provide a long-term look at the Huguenots' descendants as they continue to put down roots and prosper. They continue to put their roots everywhere. All of the above works have made similar arguments concerning the rapidity with which the Huguenots lost their unique French identity in colonial America. Their reasons vary from an aggressive push on the part of the Anglo-Americans to conform, the crumbling organization of the Huguenot Church as a whole, to the lack of any unifying social structure in the New World. However, there are still several questions that remain unasked and unanswered. Why did the Carolina Huguenots so readily surrender their religious identity? Were they coerced, as Goodfriend argued, or were there other factors? There were 154 Huguenots who, as adults residing in Carolina, signed the request on 697 to become naturalized English subjects. These individuals comprised the first generation of French immigrants in Carolina. They arrived in the colony as a diverse group of individuals. They were already diverse when they got there, but they were united in their aspirations for economic opportunities, they say here, but I would say power. They were united. Remember what it means to be a Huguenot. You're a Confederate, right?
Mm-hmm.
Upon fleeing the various regions in France, many of the Carolina Huguenots, like Gittin and Thibault, headed first for England. A few fled first to Holland or Switzerland before settling in Carolina. Still others arrived in Carolina by way of the northern British colony of New York. And we're in chapter 3 of this article, from legitimate Anglican subjects to merchants and planters. It says here, Judith Gittin had immigrated to Carolina in 1685 after escaping the religious persecutions of France. Find social structure in the New World.
I'm gonna stop it here. We've been into this live for about an hour and 54 minutes of this reading. There is approximately, when I finish, there'll be 1 hour. So I'll stop and take a break right here so everybody could go roll up, slim up, stretch up, rub your arthritis, kiss your wife, husband, whatever you need to do for a minute. I'm gonna turn a little bit of music on that I can't get in trouble for. I'll come to my senses to not play music that is not to my advantage anymore. Pardon my French. We've learned a lot about the Huguenot French after they all got the gutters out of France, didn't we? Now we're understanding that who do we have? Jefferson, Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, and who was that other French guy they mentioned? We got Daniel Boone, Davy Crockett, who? We got Paul Revere. All these people we done seen movies on, sitting there waving the hero on, come to find out they were swarthy people just like us, just from another country. Man. That's why we're here, ladies and gentlemen. Just to sort this stuff out, to see that things ain't as bad as we think they were, ever. I'm gonna play Underground Academy to get us started off while everybody chills out. But after New Year's, man, I'm not gonna do live shows on YouTube no more. Now I'm gonna take my shows after I edit them from Yard. As I edit them, edit out the commercials, Latino music no more that's not proof me to use. But they're not getting no more live shows out of me to be first people need to tell me what I ain't gonna get. So I'll just do like I've already been doing. I'm trying to get caught up now. But then I've watched a lot of reading before I decided that it was a position for me to start chopping them down. So, I mean, it's much easier for you to read a 30-minute show and like a series on Netflix, right? You keep coming back for more. That's the whole objective here. Keep coming back for more, everybody. And now we're all the way up here to the Revolutionary War already, and we find out that it was all about these Swarthy Huguenots fighting Great Britain. You know? So, leave us to understand that the white man ain't had much to do with us. He's still a minority in this country, although a lot of Native Americans are gone. And that hurts my heart right there to understand that all those years I was in ignorance looking for some white man in a blue costume be killing off Chinese looking Indians. And come to find out that these were black people killing black people, come all the way across from Europe to kill black people, and they succeeded. Took their land, took their valuables, enslaved a lot of them, married some of them. No wonder we don't know who we are over here in our own country. Now, generations later, because if 1823 is about up to where we're at now in the reading, that's 200 years ago. So just think how many generations of Huguenots have already lived in this country to the point where I'm almost at that verge of asking people that I see that are Jews that are not Swarthy, if they're Huguenots. I want to know. Hey, are you a Huguenot Jew? Because if you're a huguenot, that means that your ancestors are as black as I am. Going around acting like you're some separatist, you know, because they really act like somebody has done them wrong. But it doesn't mean that they don't have to still relate. And it's all about religion, and religion is a cover-up for wealth. This whole scheme has been about religion. You know, because, and that's where all the race differences come in. You know, as kid folk, they not always school folk. And they want to be themselves, and they don't want to associate with themselves because of what their ancestors have done. Because when everybody around here is looking kind of swarthy, you don't know if you might be talking to the Yeah, that term mulatto originally meant marrying a European marrying a Native American. You know, it didn't necessarily change the skin tone, but now we look at about skin tone now. You know, mulatto now means that your ancestors mixed with their ancestors, and like me, I'm a mulatto. You know, my children are all mulatto. In this new term, this new modern term. You got with me out there. Yeah, you got it. Hey, I know it's that we talking about already. Are you still with me? And the whole damn thing. Let's talk to everybody. I feel with me on the West Coast. Let's go still in the house. I want to thank D-True and The Word and Nate, my old friends. I want to thank all of y'all for coming through today. So now y'all see what I'm up to. Back. Learned my last lesson. I'm not playing nobody's music but my own from now on. I spent all this year being persecuted, violating the guidelines, and I'm so sorry that I allowed those things to happen. So I know I missed out on a lot of time of being in the chats, being on the panel, standing up for my ranch. I just want to say peace, love, and respect to everybody on that. But you can rest assured that I'm in the game now. Because YouTube keeps reminding me that music that I play in my shows, that when I become monetized, the show is not going to be monetized because of that music. Well, I won't be monetized with my music yet. How about that? And don't forget, Sunday, we're going to have a special Christmas show. I got a special announcement, awareness, however you want to state it, coming to the stage along with our special guest performer, Michael Welch will be there. Everybody tell your friends, tell your neighbors, tell your relatives, tune in to the Y2K show as we play your kind of video.
Soy Roberto, El Favorito Gringo, mi pelo es blanco, hecho en San Mateo. Dime cuando ven a México, soy una California oso, más grande de mis sueños. Es un nuevo año, nuevo tempo, no ratos or latas, no preguntas, preguntas menso, inteligente pero soy poco loco, fiestas.
Thank you for watching the Y2K show.
Presentation, yeah.
However, there are still several questions that remain unasked and unanswered. Why did the Carolina Huguenots so readily surrender their religious identity? Were they coerced, as Goodfriend argued, or were there other factors? Were there other factors? There were 154 Huguenots who, as adults residing in Carolina, signed the request on 697 to become naturalized English subjects. These individuals comprised the first generation of French immigrants in Carolina. They arrived in the colony as a diverse group of individuals. They were already diverse when they got there, but they were united in their aspirations for economic opportunities, they say here, but I would say power. They were united. Remember what it means to be a Huguenot. You're a Confederate, right? Upon fleeing the various regions in France, many of the Carolina Huguenots, like Gitten and Thibault, headed first for England. A few fled first to Holland or Switzerland before settling in Carolina. Still others arrived in Carolina by way of the northern British colony of New York. And we're in chapter 3 of this article, from legitimate Anglican subjects to merchants and planters. It says here, Judith Gitten had immigrated to Carolina in 1685 after escaping the religious persecutions of France. She had been accompanied by her mother and 2 brothers shortly after arriving in the colony. Her mother and her brothers died, all right? They died on the way, leaving her alone to pursue a new life. Her pursuit was unsuccessful, was successful, as she became the wife of one of the Charleston's most successful Huguenot immigrants, Pierre Manigault. There you go again with that guy. Their son Gabriel followed in his father's footsteps, becoming one of the most prosperous Huguenot descendants of his generation. As a merchant, what is this merchant? What are they selling? What's one of the biggest business in that time? One of the biggest business, apart from tobacco and products, also is indentured servitude, so-called slavery. Yes. So the younger Manigault had connections with markets in London, right? So they had this network in London, La Rochelle in France, Barbados, and northern British colonies. At the time of his death, his estate included lands, slaves, storehouses, residences, lots, notes, bonds, and mortgages. Was valued at 845,000 back in those times. Yo, that's millions. That's millions today, possibly trillions.
And people still spending
Or
that money.
billions, I mean. Judith's struggle had not been in vain. For the Grittons and Manigaults, the second generation had achieved the dreams that their mothers and fathers sought when they came to Carolina, right? They got their promised land and their dreams, right? There are also records of a limited number of Huguenots who owned Indian slaves. Oh, really? While this practice was not prevalent, it did not seem to hinder an individual's reputation within the community. Hannah Gerard was the widow of Peter Jacob Gerard when she penned her will in 1735. Her husband had been the son of Jacob Gerard, a wealthy Huguenot immigrant who had arrived in Carolina in 1680 with 6 slaves and enough capital to buy 4,000 acres. This wealthy Huguenot. All right? Hannah's husband died in 1711, leaving his young wife with 2 children and a large estate. In her will, Gerard left 8 of her slaves, 6 black men, 1 Indian woman, and 1 Indian man. You know, dodge all the hijacks here. You got to see who all these people are and who these so-called black men are. What are they talking about? Are they talking about indentured servants? If so, black Europeans? Something we got to look into. We just can't think it's just aboriginals or people from the islands or anything. They could even mean black Europeans. We know they were coming here by the hundreds of thousands as indentured servants too. Other
Excuse
Huguenots
me.
also owned Indian slaves. Monsieur Pierre de Saint Julien was called before the Commission of Indian Affairs in 1713 due to a report that he held two Indian women as slaves. When he appeared before the Commission of Saint de Julien, justified his position by advising the members that he held the women to justify a grievance and was subsequently allowed to continue. An item appeared in the South Carolina Gazette in 1744 of yet another Frenchman, Rene Perrier, who owned 50-year-old Indian woman. Perrier was the son of a Huguenot immigrants, David and Judith Perrier, who owned a large plantation along the Santee River in Craven County and 108 slaves. 108 slaves. Also in 1744, perhaps in response to the above mentioned news item, Pierre remarried his first wife, Florette Bonneau, the daughter of French immigrants Antoine Bonneau and Jean Elizabeth Vidu. Ownership of an Indian woman did not tarnish Pierre's standing in the community, however, because he, Carolina's third generation Huguenots, many of whom were planters and merchants, were regularly involved in the business of slavery. Oh, really? They were regularly involved in the business of slavery, either as planters who owned slaves or merchants who bought and sold them. The third generation of French descendants, born between 1715 and 1745, was a group comprised of the grandchildren of Huguenot immigrants. Its members were not as occupationally diverse as their grandparents had been. The historical records contain information on only a few Huguenots who were neither planters nor merchants. A good number of these third generation cohorts were experiencing a lifestyle that their grandparents had yearned for but had not accomplished. Many were successful planters, owning as much as 12,000 to 24,000 acres of land and 250 to 369 slaves. Others were prosperous merchants with economic ties to England and West Indies and northern colonies, so they had this network of business going on. Most merchants were also engaged in agricultural business as well, sometimes owning their own plantations, sometimes lending money to others to become established as planters. Still, others were actively participating in the colony assembly or council members, treasurers or speakers of the house. The majority worshipped in Anglican churches, but a few were still supporting the remnants of their forefathers, French churches, through their attendance with their donations. One character that is unique to the third generation is that they more frequently married outside of the Huguenot families, especially those who resided in Charleston. One common thread that ran through this generational group was that nearly all owned slaves, some owned only a few, some owned a great many. Whether colonists worked as craftsmen, merchants, or planters, nearly everyone in Carolina, male and female, had at least one slave, with the exception of the very poor. All right. This is verified in the wills of many of the French colonists. All right. They all had slaves. The Huguenots and their descendants aspired to be slave owners. I can't wait to be a slave owner or own indentured servants. Some even brought slaves with them upon their arrival in the colony. Craven County was a stronghold for French settlers, many of whom owned slaves as witnessed from their wills in 1741. John June, alias Jean June, a resident of Craven County, willed his wife, a Negro woman. He left the balance of his estate. So his wife was a so-called Negro woman, all right, this Huguenot. He left the balance of his estate, which consisted of slaves, a horse, and cattle, to his eldest son, John. Another Huguenot descendant who resided in Craven County was Abraham McCow. In 1765, McCow willed his four sons land, while his wife received furniture, livestock, and three slaves, a Negro called Charles, a young wench called Lisette, and a girl called Julata. His daughter Hester also received a ranch called Elsie. His house wench, Phoebe, was to go to whichever of his sons he so chose. Cool. All right. Yeah, we're gonna keep it going. All right. The French Huguenots of colonial South Carolina. Assimilation or Acculturation by Brenda Faye Roth, BA, University of Arizona, 1984, and University of South Carolina, 1987. Right, that's her degrees. It says here the question of assimilation versus acculturation is one that should be tested. The Huguenots of colonial South Carolina provide a forum to look at the experience of a minority group in colonial society and how they dealt with the process. This paper advocates that the French Protestants in Carolina did not disappear as a separate cultural group, but rather they adopted certain behaviors that brought them economic and political success in the colony. These behaviors included acquiring large pieces of land. That was one behavior, as amassing fortunes, right, and moving into elite South Carolina society. As a result, they threatened those who thought of them as alien, caused conflict in the colony between political factions. These conflicts refute the notion that the Huguenots disappeared as a separate identity by 1750. Cultural groups that vanish do not threaten or create conflicts because the dominant group absorbs them. All right, they're like they didn't disappear. The story of Huguenot acculturation in South Carolina shows how immigrant groups can change the host society. Again, the story of Huguenot acculturation in South Carolina shows how an immigrant group can change the host society and how the dominant group is also altered as a result of the intermingling of cultures. Assimilation in American life, the sub-process or condition, the change of cultural patterns to those of host society. It says stage, cultural behavior assimilation term, acculturation. It says two, large-scale entrance into cliques, clubs, and institutions of host society on primary group level. Stage, structural assimilation. Number three, a large-scale intermarriage. And that's called what part of the stage? A marital assimilation, amalgamation. All right. Number four, development of sense of peoplehood based on exclusively on host society. And that stage is the identificational assimilation. Number five, absence of prejudice. And that stage is attitude receptional assimilation. Absence of prejudice. Oh, yeah. Absence of discrimination. Behavior receptional assimilation. So acting like the people there. Absence of value, power conflict. Stage is called civic assimilation. All right. So they were assimilating into everything. And this is from Milton M. Gordon, Assimilation in American Life, The Role of Race, Religion, and National Origins, New York, 1964. Several historians have characterized the Huguenot experience in Carolina as assimilation. It was, however, more correctly an acculturation process, in which Huguenots did not simply become English Anglican. Minority groups in any society that acculturate do not disappear as a subculture, but they do adapt to their new environments by making behavioral and cultural changes. The acculturation process began almost immediately as the Huguenots moved into the dominant culture with ease. They arrived in Carolina soon after it was established, and the primitive conditions they found there supplied the backdrop for them to use their skills and talents to effect changes in a dynamic Charleston society and to take advantage of economic opportunities found in Carolina. French Protestants understood the importance of blending of their culture. They understood how important that was with that of the whole society. They know it was very important. We gotta we got to assimilate into the whole society while maintaining the continuity of their distinct traditions of communal and religious life, while maintaining their secret, the crypto life style. They adapted all world practices to new world demands. But as they did so, the dominant society did not completely engulf them. Author H. Hurst depicts the assimilation of the French in Carolina in religious and familial terms. The rapid assimilation of the French in Carolina, he begins into the established church and their intermarriage with other nationalities. What nationalities are remarkable features of their early history? This includes Indian nations. Okay. He states that the assimilation, John Butler agrees with both Herschel and Wallace. He refers to the Huguenot assimilation in South Carolina as a swift disappearance of a cohesive refugee group involving the pace and extent of their movement into a non-Huguenot religious group. Unlike Hirsch, however, Butler associates the Huguenot assimilation with agriculture. He states that the South Carolina Huguenot refugees began assimilating when they no longer cultivated the products traditionally associated with them, which is what? Wine and what? Silk. Silk. Land represented wealth and status in Carolina, and we find that the Huguenots purchased large amounts to ensure their stations in society. Like, hey, if we want to be successful, we got to get land, guys. And they was like, hey, let's do it. The documents reveal that the Lord's proprietors initially set aside specific regions for the French Protestants. Yet, as land in other areas became available, Huguenots quickly took advantage of these sales. They did not abandon their old settlements, though, in favor of the new ones. The combination of separate communities and purchase of additional land in other parts of the Low Country shows that both community and wealth accumulation were important. They were very important. All right, now it says a genealogical history. Jews and
Write
Muslims
that
in
book
British
title down. You
colonial
can go and find a lot of
America
information on it that we've been
by
covering.
Elizabeth Hirschman, Donald Yates. Despite the small nucleus and founder effect, both the Normans and the American colonists were extremely diversified in their rank and file. The former includes Danes, Vikings, Norwegians, Flemings, Picards, Bretons, Frenchmen, many from Toulouse and Aquitaine in the south and region called Languedoc, a number of a Spanish or French Jews and Muslims. All right, the last mentioned typically operated the armories, the mints, and construction industries. All right, the last two, which were the Jews and the Muslims, these were the ones in charge of what? The armies, minting the money, the coins, the construction industries, while supplying most mercantile professions with a strong component, as well as all banking, personnel, and civil servants because of their literacy and fluency in accounting. They were all the bankers. The Norman capital of Rouen possessed one of the largest Jewish communities in Europe, ranking alongside Toulouse and Rome. Constantinople and such Spanish cities as Toledo and Cadiz, the institutions of exchequer, originally a chessboard or abacus, star chamber, based on the concept of star, Arabic for node. All right, you hear that? Now, I know you guys seen the checkered floor on this Masonic symbolism. This is what it means. They're telling you straight up here what it means. The note, the money, the note, the bank note, right? The star chamber, the money, the control, the checkboard, the pieces. Star chamber based on the star Arabic for note. Sheriff marshals and other civil titles came from Mozarabic Spain and or the south of France. So all these cops, sheriffs. All right, now we got cops and sheriffs. And now where did that come from? From Arabic Spain, or the south of France, and were not outgrowths of the originally machinery of Norman, Anglo-Saxon, or Frankish states. In identical fashion, the immigrants who trickled and then streamed into the colonies comprehended Scotchmen, Irishmen, Welsh, Channel Islanders, Border Scots, French, Dutch, Flemish, Germans, Poles, Swedes, and Cornishmen, as well as people
Oh
from London
my
and the
God.
English Heptarchy, Kent Essex, the West Country, and the Midland Sussex, Northumbria, Yorkshire. Both movements had a traditional character, although the Normans, though of themselves as they thought of themselves as Frenchmen, they had not resided long enough in Normandy to become amalgamated with the local population and were still pagan Norsemen at heart. The largest emigration of all occurred with the so-called Huguenots, who, as we shall see, were in many cases second or third generation Spanish and Portuguese Jews who traded their French colors for English, Flemish, or some other nationality as they fed religious persecution. Again, yeah, well, they're letting you straight up know that these Huguenots basically they were third generation Spanish and Portuguese Jews who traded that even the Huguenot identity for English, Flemish, and other nationalities as they fed religious persecution. So they became Russians, Irish, Protestants, Quakers, uh, you know, Presbyterians.
All right, so we live. I remember. I'm here. I'm still here. All right, so Amaru Capona, they're not Caucasian. You missed the whole presentation. You're ignoring it, and don't come distract you. We'll remove you. You're just giving opinions. And I hope you guys enjoying the presentation. Yeah, we live. We're gonna continue. We're almost done.
Both academic studies and informal family histories attest many of the Spanish and Portuguese colonists in Central and South America, Mexico, and the Caribbean were conversos and moriscos. Although they might appear to be good Catholic Christians on the surface, they were in reality crypto Jews and crypto Muslims.
All right, crypto Jews and crypto Muslims. Why are you ignoring that? The information speaks for itself, not opinions. We're done with opinions. In this channel, we don't do that.
Secret Jews and secret Muslims, they practiced the traditions of Judaism and Islam in the privacy of their own homes, sometimes in small de facto communities or intermarried family groups, both Judaic and Islamic law, excused this behavior on grounds that such temporizers were constrained to submit to political pressures to save life and property. The earliest martyrs to the commandment of the Torah requiring Jews to declare themselves as separate and set apart from the other people were called anusism or anusum, forced ones. The Inquisition rolled out a dragnet complete with tip sheets, rewards, and public spectacles that feared auto de fe Judaizers as well. Although the bulk of the refugees fled to North Africa and Ottoman or Turkish lands and the Levant, thousands of others sought safety in France and the Low Countries. As Protestantism swept across Western Europe, many of these Jewish conversos and Moriscos became often only outwardly Protestant. They became what? Protestant. They're the Protestants in history that were coming in the colonial times. These are the Protestants. We're talking about Jewish conversos and Moriscos people, all right, Huguenots, Hussites too, Anabaptists, Calvinists, same thing, German Reformed Walloons, same thing, Mennonites, same thing, Dunkers, Quakers, Puritans, and Presbyterians, all same thing. These are all conversos from Jewish and Morisco people that were expelled through even since the 1300s. They were being expelled from Spain and Portugal and the Iberian colonies. When the British, Dutch, and French began establishing colonies on the Atlantic seaboard, they sent as colonists, listen to this, not subjects of high political and social rank from their respective countries, but for the most part recently arrived patently anti-Catholic, newly minted Protestants. Many were debtors, prisoners, or servants. Again, many were what? Indentured servants, right? Protestants, these so-called Irish Protestants, Scottish Protestants, these Quakers, the German, no, these were Huguenots, aka Jewish conversos, Moriscos.
All
That's
right.
why they had all these titles, and they were against the Catholic Church.
Yep.
So many were debtors,
Yeah.
prisoners, right? We know of the convicts, right? Or servants, indentured servants, slaves, cast-offs of society who were struggling to get onto their own feet in the new country. In May 1572, Drake set sail from Plymouth in a ship named the Swan and the Pasha, English royal emblem and Ottoman title. Arriving in Panama, he formed an alliance with a group of French Huguenots. So he was in Panama and there was already Huguenots in Panama, all right? AKA what? Moriscos Sephardic Jews, right? Jews. He got to Panama and they were already there, setting up shop there. Among refugees of the Spanish Inquisition can be believed. They succeeded in capturing a Spanish treasure caravan totaling 300 tons of silver. Drake returned to England not only a stupendously wealthy man, but also a national hero capitulated to the highest fame. So he robbed the Huguenots in Panama,
Mm.
right? And everywhere else they were. Among Drake's other exploits was the first English circumnavigation of the world sailing in the Golden Hind. Kabbalistic title. That's a Kabbalistic title following Sephardic Morisco maps drawn by Mercator, Abraham Ortelius, Ortello, and Italian. A for now, so all these people, Sephardi Jews and Moors, of course, again, they're the map makers, navigators, right? They were the ones mooring the ships. So we propose that not only Drake was Drake aware that he had Sephardic Jewish antecedents, but the Spanish were as well. His surname Drake is Spanish for dragon. All right. DNA samples from Drake's brother's descendants, Francis, had no children, show their Y chromosome to be type R1A1, a common Ashkenazi Levite lineage. So by 1548, the Hawkins family and its associates were trading in Morocco, a haven for both Sephardim and Moriscos. A haven for what? Sephardi Jews, too. Sephardim, remember Sephardim, the French ports with which they family traded. Dieppe, Rouen, and La Rochelle were also heavily populated by Protestant Huguenots, many of the whose origins were Sephardic and Morisco. The French Protestants by 1560 had undertaken attacks on Spanish interests in Cartagena, Santa Marta, Havana, and Santiago. One may speculate that when Rouen, a center of English Jewry, exempt from many of the regulations concerning Jews since the time of William the Conqueror or before, passed to the French under Queen Mary in 1553, many Rouenites Jews threw in their lot with the Huguenots to escape the growing anti-Jewish climate. All right, Rouen and Le Havre became popular stopping off points for Spanish Jews in exile. All right, so even Jews, what became Huguenots? At any rate, it was the Sephardic and Morisco populations of Spain fleeing after 1492 to France, the Dutch Republic, and England that was most committed psychologically and militarily to her destruction as a world power. By 1569, the Huguenots and English merchants in the port of Plymouth were working in concert to assail Spanish shipping and the imperial treasure fleet. The French Cardinal Chatillon, a Huguenot, likely Sephardic, despite his Catholic office, the name perhaps originally Castillon, was in London on a campaign urging an attack on all the enemies of God, otherwise called Papists. Drake's kinsmen and the Chapernones were deeply involved in this effort, as was Cornish man named Philip Boduoshide. All right, Robert Robin Sidney, Earl of Leicester. The list of family names likely Sephardic or crypto-Jewish ancestry in Elizabethan England will not be complete without two much more prominent players in the trade and diplomacy of the day. The first is the Sidneys, also spelled Sidone, as in Sidon. Palestine, one of the leading figures in this line was Robin Sidney, Earl of Leicester, 1563. 1626, Robin is a form of Reuben. Robin is a form of the tribe of Reuben, the name favored by crypto Jews. Robert Sidney's father, Henry, was a radical Protestant. According to biographer Hay, in 1569, Robert was placed under the tutelage of Hubert Lagwit, a scholarly Huguenot emigre. There are also French traders, Christophe and Jean Bresson and Bernard Fartout, Arabic Fartout. Several Huguenot businessmen based in La Rochelle had interests in the Azores, including the Marano Labat family, the Maranos, converted Catholic Jews, all right, and Moors as well, who helped settle French Canada. Louis de La Ronde, Armigo Nolet, and Antoine Sauvre, one Abram Vogelier, seller of birds, Ashkenazi, served as combined Swedish, Danish, Dutch, Hamburg, and Spanish council. In 1620, the Virginia colony had another new governor, Francis Wyatt, Arabic surname, Wyatt. All right, so the Wyatt, which is Arabic, became Wyatt, who put a premium on obtaining female settlers. Economic efforts included timber production, wineries and ironworks, and glass manufacture. Mulberry trees were planted to foster silkworms and silk making. Again, silk, right? Silk, a Huguenot trade, right? Silk. Why? Well, we know why now. All these industries were ones in which Sephardic Jews, Moriscos, and Ottoman Turks excelled. Sericulture in particular was a secret art jealously guarded and known only to them. The flight of the Huguenots from Catholic France beginning about 1575 brought silk manufacturing to England so that by the end of the 17th century, Huguenots numbered as high as 80,000 in London. Many of them were silk weavers or skilled craftsmen in the ordered textile arts in Shoreditch and Spitalfields, only 2 or 3 generations removed from being Spanish or Italian Jews. The Constitution of the Virginia Company was rewritten in 1621, named now as proprietors were Sir Francis Wyatt, Governor Francis West. All right, so they names all these people. A lot of them most likely what Huguenots or what, aka what? Like I said, they were marrying into or assimilating into with the indigenous people. It says, with its 3 large volumes, Jacob R. Marcus, The Colonial American Jew, 1492-1776, 1970, is the most substantial work on the Sephardic presence in British North America. Marcus traces roots of American Jews to the important French crypto-Jewish Sephardic community beginning about 1550. He emphasizes that many of the Iberian refugees publicly belonged to Huguenot, Walloon, or other Protestant denominations. All right, other Protestant denominations. He also acknowledges the crypto Jewish and openly Jewish Sephardic communities in the Netherlands, which served as the seed bed for the large scale return of the Jews to England beginning about 1650, as well as the foundation of the New York colony. As does Cat's late star, Marcus focuses attention on the underground Jewish community that flourished in England from the reign of Henry VIII he suggests we note in chapter 1 that Christopher Cologne, all right, pay attention now, this is a bomb right here. He suggests, as we noted in chapter 1, that Christopher Cologne, or Cologne, right, not Columbus, Cologne, Cristobal, or the Christ bearer, was a converso Jew whose family resettled in Italy, and that not only Columbus, navigator, but also 5 additional crew members were Jewish along.
All right, so just to clear up, because we got the presentation and the sources and everything. Yeah, he was Sephardic Jewish, but he was Portuguese. He wasn't from Genoa. He wasn't Genoese. He wasn't Italian. He was a Portuguese Jew from a town called Cuba. His great uncle was Henry the Navigator. He had connections navigating. It was in the bloodline.
Okay. With that little recap going on right there, I'm going to go ahead and stop the show, the reading right there, so that we stopped at 4 hours, 13 minutes, and 3 seconds. You know, a lot of what we went over at first was a recap. That's why I went so long into it for tonight, is that it was mainly because we had I had gone back too far, but it was good for a recap that brought, you know, everybody that was here today up to speed with where we actually had left off at. But like I said, we're going to have 1 more hour left tomorrow, and then I got a short video for you after we do this 1 hour that talks about some other crypto Christians that came to America as Sephardic Jews, Morisco Moors, perpetrating being Christians. You know, but just in recap, we can see where a lot of Native Americans have gone off to, and you know, a few generations later, how do we know that we're not all descendants of Morisco Moors or Sephardic Jews? You know, I mean, as far back as I gathered information from my grandfather that went back to the late 1700s from what he was saying. I didn't understand all of it, but I was so hooked on Zorro and the Three Musketeers being white people, I couldn't believe that he was actually talking about black people being all this. But now look at what we got in our heads, and now we got to deal with. We all realize now that all those people that we've been watching on TV, because that's where, you know, most black people, most white people, that's where we got our history from. It wasn't in the books in school. The books had already been tainted. But when they brought the books outside of school and started making movies out of it, that was like to confirm the information that they were saying was true. And now we find out that information is not true at all. Right? So I'm on tonight as our going out song for you tonight, okay? I want to thank everybody for coming, as usual. I look forward to all of you coming through tomorrow.
Cutting through lanes, bass on boom and to rattle the brain. Easy to hog and my status the same. Fresh outfit to compliment the pace. I'm on tonight and the party won't wait. Running through these lights at a NASCAR pace. Under city lights with some stunners on my face. I'm on tonight, feeling as fresh as my pain. Fresh candy paint on the riding through your city, what's up? I'm on tonight, riding through those city lights. Fresh candy paint on the headed to a party, what's up? I'm on tonight, vibing in those city lights. Fresh candy paint on the sitting with a hottie up front. I'm on tonight, partying under city lights. Fresh candy paint on the on a bleed, yes sir. I'm on tonight, vibing under city lights. Arm out the window asking Hottie her name. Offer her a ride and sit next to me. Enjoy the city life, just don't OD. Caught up under city life just like me. Headed to a party while she puffs on beats. Pull around the corner, see the party on the head. We party under city lights, dancing in the street. Doors open, time smoking, speakers on bleed. Fresh candy paint on dubs. Riding through your city, what's up? I'm on tonight, riding through those city lights. Fresh candy paint on dubs. Headed to a party, what's up? I'm on tonight, vibing in those city lights. Fresh candy paint on dubs. Sitting with a hottie up front. I'm on tonight, partying under city lights. Fresh candy paint on dubs. Puffing on a bleed, yes sir. I'm on tonight, vibing under city lights. Dancing in the street with the car still rolling. Smelling like a skunk cause the police still going. Under city lights till the sky turn morning. Speakers on boom till the lights stop blowing. We body rock till the cops patrolling. Jealous of the candy and the chrome that's showing. Fresh candy paint on dubs, flam boasting. I'm on tonight, leaving all my haters toasted. Fresh candy paint on dubs, riding through your city, what's up? I'm on tonight, riding through those city lights. Fresh candy paint on dubs, headed to a party, what's up? I'm on tonight, vibing in those city lights. Fresh candy paint on dubs, sitting with a hottie up front. I'm on tonight, partying under city lights. Fresh candy paint on dubs, puffing on a bleed, yes sir. I'm on tonight, vibing